What if a single word in the Bible was never meant to be there?
What if that one mistranslation shaped how entire cultures understand love, faith, and identity?
That mistranslation happened in 1946. And for decades, it has been repeated, defended, and weaponized.
Now we're tracing how that moment continues to echo across churches, classrooms, and countries. We're exploring how misinformation about scripture spreads and how critical thinking, education, and honest dialogue can help us see the bigger picture.
This is the 1946 Culture Shift Tour, UK, a journey through language, belief, and the stories that shape us.
Are you ready? Are you ready for this? Welcome to this very, very special Pride edition, Pride 2026. And we have the one, the only, Dr. Lady Phyll Opoku-Gyimah. I'm so excited to have you on this special 1946 Culture Shift Tour episode with me and Rocky. Really, honestly, it's been a long time coming, and just really, really happy that you're joining us all the way from Barbados, having a really relaxing holiday, well deserved, of course. But yeah, this is a really, really special edition. You know, Phyll, our journey goes back quite some time now. We've been sisters in this advocacy world, advocating for our trans siblings, our LGBTQ plus siblings from across the spectrum, across the world. And I'm really excited for you to join us here today on this special episode. We are calling it a special episode because we're doing it because it's Pride, and it's part of our finale episode of our UK Culture Shift Tour. So we're really, really happy to have you here today. But Phyll, I know you, I know Rocky knows you, but for those people who haven't yet got to meet the lovely Phyll, could you do us a little bit of an introduction about who you are, who Lady Phyll is, for those who don't know?
Sure, but before I start, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge my two sisters, the partners in crime, or not even in crime, in life, right? So it is an absolute pleasure to be on this, let's call it the special podcast. I think we've been meaning to do this for so long, but it's just connecting our diaries and our calendars because life happens. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for also holding this space of having these conversations. And I've watched and I've listened to all your podcasts, thus far. And I'm like, this is really good. And, I don't want to say you saved the best till last, but hey, don't want to upset anybody else, but everyone was great. But yeah, I just want to have fun with this, but also, delve into some of the seriousness because the world just definitely feels like it's on fire. So when anybody asks me, who's Lady Phyll and what does she do? And where does she go? What does her advocacy look like? What does her joy look like? I think it depends on any given day, who you might get, depending on what battles we're fighting or what sweet magic, my partner has created that allows me to smile. So most people know me as Lady Phyll. My name is Phyll Opoku-Gyimah. I am the co-founder and the CEO of UK Black Pride, which is the largest celebration of LGBTQIA plus people who are from the diaspora, Africa, Caribbean, Asian, Latin American, Middle Eastern, and also our indigenous populations and community. We've been going for 20 years. It's just been amazing, but I'm sure we'll speak about that. And I'm also the executive director of DIVA Charitable Trust and the DIVA magazine, which really aims to celebrate and empower LGBTQIA plus women and non-binary people. And I'm a patron to Micro Rainbow, who supports people seeking asylum and some of the challenges that they go through in coming to this country, seeking a better life for themselves, given that they are fleeing torture and persecution and, criminalization in countries of their birth. But besides that, I do many other things. And I guess my important job is being a good partner, which of course I am. Not that I'm showing the ring, trying to show off. But I am also I think my hardest and biggest job is being a mother to, although she's not a young child anymore, she's 30 and probably still costs me just as much as she did when she was 6 months old. Yeah. So that's a kind of snapshot about me. But I would say I'm a community builder. I'm an activist. I'm an advocate. I'm a friend. I'm a lover. I'm so many different things, different times, but
Yeah.
some all at the same time.
Phyll, that is a portfolio and a half. When do you get time to sleep?
Well, I don't know. I guess I sleep now because I think during my years I've learned to spell and say the word no, because you can't be everything to everyone all of the time, because you then don't pour into your own cup.
Absolutely. Thank you, Phyll. That was a lovely introduction.
Being a partner is really important, and it's lovely to also have a partner that supports the work that we do, because I can imagine your schedule is very full. And I know all the things Josie and I Josie and I do, not try to do, but do, between work, personal life, activism, going out and meeting new people. It's a lot. So I'm really excited that you're here. So excited that you're sharing all of your wisdom with us. We got to see you in real time the other day at the UAL
Yeah.
Diversity Matters UK Black Pride Coalition, which was really great to start and kick off Black Pride. And I really appreciated how you engaged with the young folks who had questions, and you're very open to engaging and sharing a piece of yourself, which I think really matters. And that stood out to me. So thank you so much for all you do, and thanks for being here.
The first burning question is about what pulled you into activism.
That's a very nice way of putting that question, because normally people ask, what was that single moment that turned you into an activist? And I often say, I don't think I found activism.
Mm.
I think activism found me, right? It's by virtue of being born a Black young girl that turned into a Black woman who happens to be queer, that happens to have come from a working class background,
Mm.
Understood the struggles, being a single mother. These are all things that society has systems that are not designed for us. So you end up having to either fight those systems or you get subsumed into those systems. And for me, I didn't stay silent on any number of issues that impacted my life. And I guess this is why I always go to the word intersectionality, because it really helps me understand that framework, but the life that I lead, that I'm at the crossroads of the intersections of so many things coming at me. So yeah, there wasn't like a one defining moment, but it was continual understanding that I have to say something about it. And I think when you're younger, you don't necessarily have the diction or the vernacular or the articulation to explain, this is what that pain feels like. This is what that anger and hurt feels like. So you go full throttle, hammer and tongs, and you're angry, but you don't know, is it legislation you need to change? Is it, the housing situation that you want to speak about? Is it the fact that child benefit or the income support that you received when you were on benefits didn't stretch far enough? What did all of that look like? So I guess my activism grew from understanding systems of oppressions
Yep.
that harmed me, that I realized that there was such a shared commonality with so many others that had been fighting this too. So you join coalitions, you join meetings, you join particular groups, and you learn from others about, you're not an island by yourself. You're not doing this alone. Yeah.
Let's summarize again. It's always like lived experience, isn't it? How that, and similar to both myself and Rocky as well, with our lived experiences, we always say we didn't choose this, it chose us. Sometimes into activism, I love always referring to Trevor Noah and his book where he says he was born a crime. Those are the things, the realities of our lives from marginalized people, whether you're a person of color, whether LGBTQ plus, sometimes it's like you can't just lay there and back down. You have to get up and fight, because if you don't, right? And there's community, there's people out there that are willing to help you. And thankfully, as we saw at the thing that we were on Wednesday, so many young queer people now feeling so much more empowered and brave to be able to say their piece. So, and it's because of people like you, and people who've
And
come
you.
forward, so on. So it's great. It's great to see this and
Yeah.
continue to push those barriers and like really advocate and try and get to a space where people won't have to fight as hard anymore. But thanks for that, Bill. Thank
And
you.
intersectionality is so important. I really appreciate that you mentioned that and you continue to mention that. It's like I heard recently a quote where it's like, they came for this group of people and I did nothing because it didn't impact me. And then they came for this group of people, I did nothing. And then this group of people, I did nothing. Then they came for me and there was no one left to fight. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, isn't that true? Like we need
Hmm.
to see and understand how much we're interconnected within the differences, and it's the system of oppression, this empire, so to speak, that really oppresses in many different ways. So that's really
So I
important.
love that. That's a poem, and I should remember the name
I
because
know.
we'd use it in the trade union because we were always talking about, well, if you sit there and you do nothing, then when it's time for them to come for you, who else is left around? So I love that. And it escaped my mind,
Yeah, yeah.
the person
I, I,
that
I'm
wrote
I'm
it.
doing Wilkerson's book on the caste system in the United States, and so she had
Mm,
mentioned it in the end of her book. But it's a really important lesson, and
Hmm.
we always say too, with in connection with our film and working with the church, that right now the 1946 movie talks about the mistranslation of the word homosexual in the Bible for LGBTQ people, but really it's only a matter of time before the Bible is used against you. Is what I like to say to people
yeah.
who are using the Bible perhaps in a way that isn't appropriate, that oppresses people. It's like it can be twisted and used in a way where they will come after you too. So let's really just put it in perspective.
Yeah. And let's just take a moment to say 1946 was brilliant. Oh my gosh. I learned so much that I said to my partner, "Oh, you've got to watch this. You've got to watch this. It is so good." I was like, that woman, oh my gosh, what was her name again? See,
People.
this is Kath. I was like, "Girl, I want to be your friend." The way she literally delved in and questioned and challenged, it made me think so much about, growing up in the church and what we'd hear, what we had to live by, what we were told. There's so many intersecting factors of even, I would like to see part two of how really let's delve deep into colonialism and what was left, that
Hmm.
we have these major sodomy laws in countries because the Bible has been used as a weapon. I was also listening to a young woman in the States, which she talked about, yeah, well, who wrote the Bible? But actually, there was two parts to the Bible, and I'm going to send it to you. There's two parts to the Bible where when they had slaves or enslaved
Yep.
people, this book was talking about obey thy master, but
Hmm.
took out anything about, forgiveness and reparations and love and hope. So it has been weaponized in such a way that it has been used for control.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
hope 1946 goes right on to 2030 and keeps talking about this until we're able to dismantle these words that have been so harmful and practices that have been so painful that don't allow people to survive and thrive.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I will plug Kathy Baldock's new book now. It's called Forging a Sacred Weapon: How a
Yep.
1956 Mistranslation Led to Anti-Gay Theology. And so that book is available now. It'll give all of the footnotes for the research in the film. It's a 600-page book, but very accessible. It's academic, but also accessible, footnoted, and really just well done, looking at the 2,000 years of human sexuality. Actually, I think she goes into more than that of how things and ideas have changed over time through the Bible, medicine, history, psychology, sociology. So everyone should check out Forging a Sacred Weapon. And if you want to see part two, I am a filmmaker. I'm always looking for It's either time or money. So if somebody wants to see another, they want to, call me up. It just takes some money. So I would be happy to.
Yeah. No shame in your game in asking for it. If you don't ask,
Listen,
you never know
how
if you
else do
can
these
get.
things get made? So anyway, go ahead.
No, no, I was just like enjoying this. Like, there's so much work, isn't it? And again, just to kind of plug back on the intersectionality element here, it's just such a powerful word because, again, so many different people. You mentioned Kathy Baldock, who isn't a queer person per se, but like has been such a huge, strong advocate around, debunking all these myths and, helping and helped. If it wasn't for her and Ed, like, the work that they did for uncovering that information that has been locked away all this time, where would we be? Would the film have even been made? Who knows? But anyway, I'm sure at some point, maybe someone else would have found it. We'll never know because we did it.
Maybe. Maybe. I'm so glad they did, and then I, as a filmmaker, stumbled on it, and, you can imagine being a queer person who grew up in the church and
Yeah.
learning of the 1946 mistranslation, I'm like, "I have to make this movie," and so I felt actually it would have been irresponsible of me as a filmmaker and a queer person who grew up in the church not to
Mhm.
make this movie, because Kathy's book is fantastic, and like I said in her first book as well, very accessible, but not everybody's gonna read it. Now they should, I'm going to plug it again, but the movie will hit more, will reach farther, faster, and things like that. And so I quit my job, all the things. Anyway, enough about that, though. We are here to talk
No, no, but
real.
I guess this is good. We always knew that this conversation could be a conversation of us breaking bread together, sipping on water, having some juice, and it could go on. So I love that we can deviate and divert and pivot in lots of different directions
Mm.
because it's just organic. We're not stage managing this. We're not trying to say, let's answer this question next. Let's do this because you've both got so much to talk about and it comes through. And as we said, all of our lives intersect with each other in different ways. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
connected.
Yeah.
I want to touch a little bit about, because we kind of mentioned there, we spoke about the quote about they come for them. We mentioned this quote, which that's such a powerful quote. And I do love it as well. I want to talk a little bit, Phyll, about the fact that you do come from civil service work. So you did, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your trade union movement and how that shaped your work. I know, obviously, coming into activism was around you being a mom, trying to advocate for being a Black mom within the UK and where systems were up against these systems that were not set up for people like us. But I want to talk about leaning into your trade union background because I think that's an important one to mention. It's just
Yeah.
that shape the work that you do and how you kind of move in circles now.
Yeah, sure. But can I just say, Josie, if I'm looking at activism,
Mm-hmm.
part of that didn't come from being a mum first. It came from being an 11-year-old young girl that lived outside of London, that came into a place in Enfield Town with my friend, totally blonde hair, blue eyed. And it was the NF, which NF was stood for National Front, BNP, British National Party. It was their headquarters. And they were having a march that day. And I realized very quickly after this woman with like an older woman with a tartan trolley said to me, you need to stand in that shop front because they don't like your sort. Those were her words. I will never forget that as an 11-year-old child heading to Townhouse to go and we did like disco tap dancing and blah, blah, blah. And she said, I would get in that shop front because they don't like your sort. And then, of course, from there, I started reading up loads about the
Mm.
far right, back 30, and then doing more reading, but realizing that school does not teach us, especially as Black, brown folk, marginalized folk, how we've contributed to society. So when you see the rates of exclusion of young Black boys, young Black girls, is not because we're bad, it's because you don't teach us that we're valued in society. You erase, exclude, and you want to teach us about, Henry VIII and all his wives, and you want to talk about the Battle of Hastings, 1066. That doesn't tell me where my forefathers and foremothers fitted into society, right? So
Yeah.
that was my road to getting in trouble at school and, asking questions, not wanting to hear about Christopher Columbus that founded the Americas. And I'm like, who are you? So I'm I'm like, okay, let's fast forward this. But your question about working in the civil society, not civil society, but civil service, I walked into a job centre.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter must have been 5.5 months old, and I wanted to work. I wanted to be back on that labour market ladder because the benefits that I was receiving just weren't going to cut it.
Mm.
So I walked in and I started in the job centre, and then I went into DWP. And I say job centre, it was called the Employment Service at the time. That's how far back it was. Then I went into DWP. I went into Fraud Investigation Service. I was a terrible fraud investigator, by the way. Because I was like, no, they didn't do this. You've got to understand the system doesn't help them. So I was terrible. And I got told I wasn't inconspicuous enough when I was on my training. But I also joined the trade union that represents civil service,
Mm-hmm.
which is PCS. And PCS stands for Public and Commercial Services Union. My mum and dad had always said, if you buy a car, you get car insurance. So if you take employment, you need some form of mechanism that protects you, because we know when your skin tone is one color, when you're queer, or when you're disabled or differently abled, I should say, you are picked off in the workplace, and especially back then. So she said, always join a trade union. And when they came to this country, they joined what was called NAPO, which is now Unison, the largest union for local government workers. So trade unions have always been in my blood. And yeah, I started off as shop steward on the floor and then learning more. And I got the opportunity through the trade union to go to university, because I studied trade union labour relations law and employment law, but this was done through the trade union, because it's not just about the bargaining powers, it's also about education and really sort of supporting us to take care of workers. So workers' rights are big and huge on my agenda. But I would say, whilst trade unions are great and I would advocate for them every single day, I
Mm-hmm.
also know that there are still people within trade unions who have some opinions that I would call bigoted.
Yeah.
And there are trade unionists who talk about being progressive when they're not. So discrimination happens everywhere. And, there are people never want to talk bad about platforms or institutions that are supposed to be doing something that changes the trajectory. But I'm going to be very honest. My time in the trade union, which was over 10 years, it came at a price, because some of the difficulties and challenges that I faced with individuals that didn't like me having voice,
Mm.
having voice and agency, having autonomy over how I speak about my own Black body and what we need in workplaces, and the cases that come out that are discrimination cases that face primarily Black people or marginalized or underrepresented people. We can't look at things as if, the queer community is a monolith, right? We
Mm.
cannot do that. But I think sometimes when you call yourself a progressive, you want to talk about equality for all, but it can never be equality for all when you don't have the same rights afforded to everybody.
Yeah.
You
Agreed.
can be diverse. You can have, it's like, diversity is what's in the room. We're diverse, but what we're finding is that we're talking about wanting equity for all of us. We're wanting to make sure that Rocky has the funds and the resources to do what she does, that Josie can speak about her lived experience from coming from Southern Africa to being in the UK and understanding the climate of racism in a different way. We're talking about me being from a working class background and a single mother. And where is the equity in that? We're not even adding on the other layers and bows and strings to what we're navigating, but it's not equitable.
No.
So that's what we need to do. And I guess my work in the civil service, in trade unions, is always got to be about equity and not just diversity, inclusion, and equality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love
Can be going off on a tangent. Yeah.
Oh, I
Love it.
love that. That actually brings us into our next segment quite nicely, actually, about amplifying voices. And I love your trajectory, and coming out of a need and then being able to use your mind, your talent, your services, your heart to be able to create change and make difference, which I really appreciate. So, I guess we'll talk about amplifying voices. And throughout your career, you focused on creating spaces for others, right? We see this over and over again. So let's combine this whole section. Like, why is it important for amplification? And specifically, why is it important within the Black LGBTQ voices, trans voices, other marginalized voices to not only include, but to center? And
Mm.
and how do we do this? How do we make meaningful representation? What does it actually look like?
Yeah. Huge question. Yeah. But one that's important, and I think that there's different ways to amplify voices. I'm the executive director of DIVA Charitable Trust, which has DIVA magazine, and that's a platform within itself. Media has not always been on the side of queer folk, of queer
Mhm.
Black folk. It has shaped a narrative and told stories about us, but not for us.
Yep.
So we need to also be in those spaces that we can change that narrative and speak truth to power about what we want, what we need, how we need it, when we need it, and how we want to build and forge partnerships that allow us to do that and have this. I talk about a theory of change. You can't strategize without having a theory of change about what you actually want and need to change. So that's really important in amplifying voices. Question is, whose voices do we want to amplify? And um, there was I think it was about 5, 6 years ago, I was at an event outside of London, and this mature white man, he was like, "Oh, you seem so angry. You seem so, so angry." The typical stereotype trope of a Black woman being angry when really I'm just assertive and I'm good at what I do. He said, "What do you fight for first? You can't fight for everything." And it showed me in that split second that people will want you to dissect yourself and only wear one hat because maybe that's the only thing that they want to deal with at the time. What I would say is we don't have to only fight for one thing. We don't have to only talk about one thing, because I go back to the word intersectionality, and thank you, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, for coining and framing and terming that word that helps us understand. But there are different moments at which there are emergencies.
Mhm.
So right now we are on our real awareness of our trans and non-binary siblings who are facing probably the greatest amount of hostility that we've ever seen constantly in the newspapers. I am not for one second, and I want to just make this very clear, comparing like for like of discriminations and harms. So racism will always be a weapon of mass destruction.
Mhm.
It's there. The work, our systems are all rooted in racism, in colonialism, but I'm talking about the emergency that is faced by our trans and non-binary siblings who happen to be Black, who happen to be queer, who happen to be any number of different things. So I would say how we amplify voices, we look at the cause, we look at what's needed by terms of resource mobilization, different groups and coalitions and communities and even corporates that, don't pink wash away and just tokenize things, coming together to really say, this is a crisis and this is an emergency right now.
Mm.
And this is what we have to deal with. There's a analogy, if I could put it that way. I live on a road where there's 15 houses, 16 houses, and it's a bit more of a cul-de-sac. if house number 3 was on fire,
Mm-hmm.
do you think the fire brigade is going to come and spray water on house number 1 and 2 before it gets to number 3? No, it has to go direct to the actual cause and deal with that so it doesn't spread, and it needs to be contained. So that's what I mean by emergencies. Whilst the surrounding areas are just as important, you need to contain the fire and out it and deal with it so nobody else is hurt in the crossfire of this blaze. And that's what emergencies and priorities have to look like. Otherwise, we end up not dealing with the cause and effect.
Whew, that was powerful. When you put it in that context, right, of like a house burning, you need to deal with that house first. Because again, yeah, that is powerful. That is just such a powerful analogy to use. And that brings us on nicely as well, Phyll, to our next sort of segment around the current situation and the landscape within the UK. We live here, but we do know that this reach is global, and sometimes people feel isolated and they might think that this is the only, the situation that they're currently going through is in isolation. But actually what we've seen over the last, maybe since like 2016, 2015 or so on, we've seen LGBTQ laws being rolled back across the globe. We've seen what's happening in Ghana. We've seen what's so many places, which is really, it can seem extremely daunting and scary for a lot of people. In some ways, they're not alone. We are here and we're not going to stop and shut things down. We are going to, do our absolute best to continue raising voices and advocate. So I wanted to ask you, in terms of our LGBTQ plus siblings, especially our trans community right now, thinking of conversion therapy as well and where we are with that in the UK. We know America around that, but just thinking about the concerns around, the publication that's currently sitting in Parliament and waiting to be published. What are your thoughts around all of this in terms of mental well-being?
Absolutely.
And also then leaning into conversion practices. Any thoughts around that for the community as well?
Yeah. I have this concern around when we say conversion therapy, because therapy for me is supposed to be something quite cathartic that brings about a change in my own well-being and understanding of how I can live my truest and my best life. But the therapies are harmful practices that have come about. And also, there are very different layers to what conversion practices do. It could be something again, a plug to 1946, the film. It could be something about the way in how your father speaks to you about you're not worthy, and when Rocky, you walked out. That is a practice within itself that feels harmful because you're being ostracized, you're being marginalized from your home and everything that you know and you love. Or it can be somebody who goes home and they find themselves, sitting in front of the church congregation because your family have brought them in. And I say this, my partner won't mind me speaking to this, is that that's exactly what happened to her. She was a queer woman, never really spoke about it, but everyone knew that she was different. And she went home and to find the church there wanting to pray on her and, speak the ill out of her. Or it could be that you go to church and you're trying to reconcile your faith, religion, belief with your sexuality or your sexual orientation, but you're even finding the church does not feel welcoming. All of these are different practices. Or you can just even be in spaces or communities where it's not legal to be who you are, that you find that level of hate doesn't allow you to get good housing in the place that you want to, doesn't allow you to go and put your children in the schools that you want them to be in, or for you to go to the college or uni that you want to go to, because you know the harm that is going to be caused at you and against people like you. So this ban conversion practices, I would like it to look deeper into what it really means for different pockets of our communities. And if it's only covering, yes, ban conversion practices and it excludes trans people, then as far as I'm concerned, it excludes everyone, because there's no equity and there's no justice in any of that if, rights are only afforded to a few people. Yeah. So I know I didn't answer your question, but I wanted to put ban conversion practices into some context, that it is not just a one blanket that we're talking about banning. There are so many different aspects of it. And of course, people might pitch them at different levels or layers, but it's all as bad, because when something messes with your mind and your well-being, you are completely, in a state of paralysis that
Yeah.
you don't know who you're going to go to. You don't know who feels safe for you. And this is why we have, and just a quick 3-second trigger warning for anyone listening, because I'm going to mention death. This is why we have such a high percentage of our young people, especially, and also young Black men, taking their lives because they don't believe their lives are valuable anymore, because they are in spaces and places that are harmful, that continue to perpetuate that harm against them. So there is a much wider and broader conversation about ban conversion practices or therapy, or whatever we term it as, that needs to be looked at in totality.
Thank you, Phyll. That was very thoughtful and, thought-provoking, but also giving us a different perspective. And I think, this is part of the podcast that is slightly a bit heavy, but people need to hear these perspectives. So thank you.
And the same things it sounds like, are going on in the UK that are happening in the US. And, the church is protected a lot by these government laws, and even if they're not, they're still, even if it's not protected in law, they're still protected. The has the ability to counsel at will sometimes, and these things need to be reevaluated and looked at and monitored very well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective on the UK landscape. Yeah.
And I think, Rocky, you're so on point about there's such a common thread of what's happening. And you mentioned they're organized. The one thing that our communities don't have is the resource and the power and the voice and agency sometimes in the spaces that those who walk through the corridors of power are able to change things at a drop of a hat. You've got, when the Americas, or, when the USA sneezes, the UK catches the cold, and it is a ripple effect. But then we have to find out, how is it that how are we going to get this resource? And in a climate that feels ever so hostile right now, the funding landscape is just precarious or difficult at the best of times. It doesn't allow us the chance or the opportunity to organize and mobilize and galvanize the way we want to. Because if we are given, £10,000, £5,000, £2,000, often funders, and there's something problematic in, the funding landscape, funders are asking us what our mothers, brothers, uncles, dogs, cats inside leg measurements are, before we've actually got round to doing the impactful work that changes lives. So, I'm sounding doom and gloom. There is so much joy in what we're doing, and there really is. But also, I think the realities of the things behind the scenes that people don't see need to be spoken about, so that we have a greater understanding of, right, we're going to step to the left at 2:00, and actually this group is going to do this at 5:00, and we have to be with them. And maybe at 7 p.m, this is how we're going to work with this particular group. And that's organization. The civil rights movement didn't happen because, Martin Luther King or Malcolm X sat there and said, oh yeah, I just have a dream. No, they organized. There was bus boycotts. There was, people, the Black Panthers coming together, looking after our children, feeding them at breakfast clubs. There was, like, so many things happening, that I would love us to get to a radical state that we can start saying, this is how we mobilize and galvanize. And of course, we need financial people, we need legislators, we need policymakers, but we need right now in this current climate a radical edge in order to start dismantling some of the things that are continuing to harm us, but are getting greater and greater and greater against us.
Yeah. The organization and the funding on the other side is, or I don't even want to say the other side because I hate the us versus them, but it just, and we found that even with, 1946 and having connections through Hollywood, like Netflix, and no one's picking up anything that's too controversial or too social justice and so we couldn't get help anywhere. But I do know that the time is coming where we will get a seven-figure check to do the real impact work that we
Yeah.
need, and so but let's then turn actually to that actual amazing part of this whole journey is the
Mm.
work that we get to do, and some of you mentioned the DIVA Charity Trust and how that's part of the impact work that you're a part of. I'd love to really know a little bit more about that. If you could tell us about your work with DIVA Charity Trust and what the impact of that organization is having, and then maybe a project that you're most excited about that continues to allow us to get up and do this work amongst all of the darkness out there.
Yeah. Gosh, you and Josie ask some big questions, don't you? Yeah, I'm like, okay, what do they want me to start on first? Let's set the
Listen, we
world
wanna
to
go
rights.
there. We
Yeah.
inspire, educate, and we learn so much on these podcasts. Are you kidding me? I learned so much in the past 40 minutes.
Yeah, we all learn together. Oh, so Diva Charitable Trust. Okay, I am so proud of leading Diva Charitable Trust. It's still very much in its infancy, so it's young. It's it was given to the community by a dear friend of mine and also somebody who's a trailblazer in their own right, Linda Riley, who set up Diva Charitable Trust, also is the founder of Diva magazine, which has gone on to speak about all things LGBTQIA plus. But what Diva Charitable Trust is there to do is really bridge the gap, but also understand how we support LGBTQIA plus, and that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, are queer, and A is the asexual. The plus is the other wonderful spectrum of our rainbow family that exists, but for women and non-binary people. And we do this in many distinct ways. So we have Lesbian Visibility Week, which is there to amplify lesbians throughout the week, but we do research, which we had a wonderful piece of research commissioned through Diva and through the Curve Foundation in the States that also works with Canada, so I don't want to leave them out.
Mm.
That's led by Franco and also Kantar, who are the research body who have been amazing. Now, this piece of research asked the question around our theme, which was health and well-being, and it's extremely apt at a time like now. But it spoke to, I guess, many different things about, more than half of LGBTQIA plus women don't go to use the services that they need in the health industry
Mm.
because of fear of that discrimination or not being believed or not feeling like their story that they're telling them will actually be listened to. And that's just terrible. We need to use these services. We need to be speaking about, smears, ovarian cancer and breast cancer. But I guess as queer women, we often feel like we're going to be asked that question 17 times again. Oh, about our sexual partner and how, does he wear a condom? Do you have protective measures? And we're probably thinking, no, it's not a he, it's a she. So
Mm.
we have to do better with some of our healthcare providers who, again, are amazing, but some of it comes down to money and funding.
Yeah.
About where what they have and how they service and look after us. So Diva Charitable Trust does many different things, but I think research for us is important because it tells us the story of where we've identified gaps, where we need to place resources, what we are going to campaign on. Is it going to be fertility for queer women or LGBTQIA women? And it also tells us, because we've asked the question about the demographic, where we're at. Which part of the UK are we at? Which parts of the US are we in? And we worked on South Africa research, so
Mm,
that's out there, and also Germany, specifically Berlin, that came through really strong. So I hope you can share the link as well
mm,
with those watching and listening, because it's a really important piece of research. But
mm.
DIVA also does a lot more than just the research. It brings together communities to tell their stories from very different backgrounds and walks of life. And this is why Diva magazine wants to be the storyteller and
Mm.
advocate for that change through its media platform. And we want to bring creatives together to just make sure that that is happening. So watch this space. You're going to see so much come through, and it's going to be more intersectional than it's ever been before. I guess the executive director at the helm is just brilliant. So, let's give her some props. And also the team. I've
Yeah.
got the lovely Roxy, who is the editor in chief of the Diva magazine. So people can hit her up. She's great.
Yeah, no, I had the a great opportunity to meet Roxy actually at one of the Lesbian Visibility Week breakfast mornings, and he is lovely. So I can agree to that. And yeah, no, you're doing some great work there, Phyll. Thank you so much.
A lot of work I didn't even know about. That's incredible.
Yep.
We'll absolutely link the research and
Hmm.
everything linked in the show notes. So
Thank you.
Yeah. And I suppose that leads us on nicely, because how could we absolutely end this podcast with not speaking about your baby, our
Oh,
connection,
baby.
which is don't tell Lisa. UK Black Pride. I mean,
Yeah.
how can we not speak about it? So for the audience members, I'm a UK Black Pride board member, very proud. And it's just such a huge part of our lives, particularly for you and me, Phyll. And for you, it's been part of your life for like 21 years this year, right? 20. So we
And I'm
should.
only 25. How did that happen?
I went to the 20th. Last year was off the charts. It was so fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
Exactly.
well, next year you're going to be there, bells and whistles.
Yeah.
2027 is going to be huge. Yeah.
So I think we should say, obviously, it's been announced, so this is not a secret. We're taking a pause this year. We need a break. Everybody needs a break now and again to, come back stronger, bigger, more ambitious than ever. So I think what we want to talk about here just a little bit is, do you want to mention the pause and why we're taking a pause? And also maybe talk about why UK Black Pride is so important, what it does for marginalized communities, and also why we need to continue supporting it even through the pause.
Yeah. Wow. You guys need to be journalists, the questions that you're asking here. So I guess let's talk about the pause first.
Hmm.
So, like Glastonbury, they can take a fallow year. We're taking a fallow year, but there's an expectation on Black and brown and queer groups that we keep on going and going and going. UK Black Pride has been running for 20 years, and and this year's our 21st year, but we even had Black Pride during COVID and hired out the Roundhouse and had a live streaming, and everything was done in safety, and it was still performed, and we managed to live stream it and also get a donation for that live streaming to go to some of our queer siblings who are those that seek asylum, who can't have their phones topped up because it costs money, so that we could give them that funding so they
Mm,
could watch UK Black Pride online. Those, again, things that people don't even know that happened,
yeah.
but it still takes place. So this pause and reset really is allowing us to refocus and reframe and reframe how we sustain ourselves.
Mm.
UK Black Pride started in 2005,
Hmm.
and it was for 200 people, and it cost £477.27.
She knows every single digit.
Absolutely. And now our last event, which took place in 2025, it cost us just a little shy under 500,000. And it is a free event
Mm-hmm.
that allows people to live, and have home, commune, and connect in a space that they occupy and it's theirs. In order to sustain that level of high momentum and greatness, you also need to pause and reflect on where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to re strategize because the world has changed. The funding landscape, and we listen to our community because we are talking about things that have become complicit in a genocide, whether it is Palestine, Congo, Haiti, Sudan, whatever we're talking about. We know that workers' rights mean a big deal. So are we upset with particular companies that don't treat workers right? How can we take their money? How can we be taking a good moral high ground position if we might accept one and not accept the other? So these are some of the things that we want to look at, our funding model. We want to look at how do we sustain a free event, because I've never believed that Pride should be paid for, because those that came before us who were fighting and protesting and claiming and occupying space that spoke about housing, police brutality, yes, let's mention the Stonewall riots, Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, and so many others that were part of this. People didn't pay to be protesting in a space where they're speaking their lived experience. So I don't believe you should be paying for UK Black Pride. But if we don't pay for UK Black Pride, where do we find the 500,000 to make sure that people are kept safe,
Yeah.
that are able to call it a brave space, and that they're able to enjoy all the many things that happen at UK Black Pride? So our pause is also to reflect, to re-strategize, and to rebuild, and to come back stronger and better in 2027 for a space that will allow us to, flourish and bloom, and have more young queer people telling us what they need and having their voices heard. And hopefully next year we have even greater spaces and greater stories to talk about for our trans and non-binary siblings, and we then get it right because we're doing this with intention and
Yep.
being meaningful about it. UK Black Pride, and Josie, you know this all too well, we do not want to be a pride that has fallen down. We've seen pride, not be able to have their prize because, one, they've run out of money. Two, they've gone bust. They've not got a really clear strategy behind, what they want to do. And other aspects of the community doesn't feel safe, or actually it doesn't feel like an intersectional pride. So it's just catering for a few. It's not speaking to the tokenism that we see when you have one black speaker, or you've still got some prides that might have done blackfacing. So we want to be a pride that speaks through many different lenses, many different languages, many different ages, and learn from the last 20 years what we do to sustain ourselves for the next 20 years. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, why
Yeah.
it's important.
I
No,
think
and
so wise. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Go ahead, Josie.
No, I was just literally going to say, I think it's also important to mention UK Black Pride is the biggest in Europe, right? In terms of Black Pride. So if not the world, dare I say that?
We are the largest Black pride in the world.
I love that. I think the pause is so important because, and what you said as far as like, where's our funding coming from? That's a really
Mm,
important question. And making sure that the organization is responding responsibly, and not only with the people you want to represent, but the people then who are bringing in the money for that. I think that's so important. But I can only imagine how much work goes into, like I said, I was there. All the artists, all the speakers, the staging, the vendors, the security. It's a massive undertaking. So regrouping to set for the 20 years, I'm all on board for it.
Yeah, and this has come from our team and our board. It's
Mm,
not me just saying, I want to travel a little bit and, understand what it means to be a fiance. Of course, that's important. Our team and our board have helped shape and take this decision because they know it's really important for us. We want
mhm,
to be around for the next 20 years. So, massive props again to I'm so lucky I have found a tribe, a group of people, chosen family that make UK Black Pride so incredibly special. When
mm,
people say to me, "Oh my gosh, you're so brilliant." Yes, I am, but actually the brilliance is around me. It's
mm,
community. It's the people that, wake up so early just to make contact with community, to bring them in, to shape the conversations that happen in our community engagement stage, to make sure those performances that we've got are amplified and, profiled in a great way. The communications that happen through our website, our social media, there's so much that goes into it.
And there's more, I'm sure, besides just the event, as we saw with
Yeah.
this, the talks that we were a part of. Josie and I did one panel, but there were 3 or 4, I think, at UAL.
Yes, yeah.
What other
Our
things do you do throughout
partnerships.
the year? Yeah, exactly. Maybe you can tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about some of the stuff you do throughout the year.
Yeah, so our partnerships are crucial to the growth of UK Black Pride because, you know, we don't want to be a one day festival that you come to because you don't just parachute into it and think that all your problems are going to be solved around racism because we've got a Black Pride or, health and housing. What we do is we make sure that there are sessions around lesbian visibility, where I'm so glad that you got to be part of that with UAL in our representation series with UK Black Pride. But we work with Bleecker. Bleecker, brilliant burgers, absolutely great. The Angry Fries, not that I'm promoting it, but I am promoting it. Bleecker was very intentional about approaching us, and the founder, Anne Kaufman. So if you need to look them up, do. It is not just a burger. It is really about the way people are looked after in that hospitality industry. Zan has come from a background where she speaks truth about some of the things that happened to her brother before he sadly passed. And she wants to do more for the queer community. So she reinvests money back into communities doing meaningful and transformative work. And our partnership has taken such a beautiful approach. So we work with Bleecker, we've done stuff with Gilead. We're going to hopefully be working with Carney a lot more. We've done things. So there's stuff happening, and it's not just London centric. It is going to be outside of London as well, because I think, Josie, you mentioned earlier, people feel isolated.
mm.
And sometimes you can't even afford a train fare, let alone bus fare, to get into London. So how do we make sure those in Wales, which Cymru Glitter are doing great work, are able to be funded? So if we are in partnership with Bleecker, we want to make sure that funding goes out to those communities doing that work.
Absolutely. And we'll come back stronger next
We
year.
will. We
Stronger.
will. Yeah, Josie's on my board. She gives me a hard time. She makes me know what accountability looks like. How much are you spending? Why are you doing this? And I'm just like, Josie, get lost. I know you're good, but go away.
I'll get
I have to deal with Josie too, though.
Yeah,
Sorry, it's not pick on Josie Day. We love Josie.
we do. We love you to bits.
yeah, anyway, thank you so much for talking a bit about UK Black Pride, because it's such an important organization, and we know it, the community knows it, and and I'm just glad that we were able to mention that in this podcast, because it's so
Yeah.
vital. Again, talking about intersectional, right? Connecting dots and how we all come together in fighting the fight and creating space for our community.
We could talk forever,
Yeah,
but
I know. We say this is just
it's a
it's
good
just
introduction to the audience of Lady Phyll, and like I said, it's been nice to connect with you and be able to learn from you and do some advocacy work. And now Josie's going to talk about some of our bigger advocacy work, but and get some advice
Yeah.
from you.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm so part because we're talking about our favorite topic, which is Africa. We're talking about our motherland, the common
Yeah.
global reach, the solidarity, and everything that's going on. I suppose leaning back from when we did Kaleidoscope Trust to TSEN,
Yeah.
all the different amazing things. Again, people don't necessarily know about the work that's going on in the background. And there's lots of amazing organizations out there that's helping so many different things around the globe. But specifically, is close to our hearts. We both know why, that's where our ancestors are from. And we want to talk a little bit about what's happening with 1946 and also, to announce that we are taking 1946 to Africa.
Woo, woo, woo. Yes, let's do this. This is
So,
exciting.
yeah, I mean, just really want to talk about your role in terms of TSEN, in terms of Kaleidoscope, in terms of all the great things that you've done, and also looking forward, the fact that 1946 are taking the culture shift tour to South Africa. We've managed to secure some opportunities in Johannesburg, and just this morning have heard about Cape Town, which is just like straight
Yeah.
off the back of that boat. It's like, So yeah, there's just some amazing things happening there. Want to get your thoughts around what activism like this will look like. Obviously, we know there's certain countries that we can't just kind of like rush into because it deserves a sensitive conversation. But also just thinking about like faith leaders, connections, intersectional approaches, and how we are. What is your advice for us here as we move into this, like, to Africa, essentially, is what I want to say.
Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind, I mean, apart from this is great, this is so exciting. And I was having a conversation with Annie, who is from Ghana,
Mm-hmm.
and they are having the film screening at Fefe Fest. So I need to put you in contact with them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in Ghana right after we know that this bill has been spoken about. But my advice to you both would be, let's make sure we don't take a colonial mindset
Mm-hmm.
to going into countries which already have their plans and their strategies, but listening to what they want and what feels right, which you do anyways, right? You do it anyways, but treating this very sensitively, that we're here to listen. We've brought you this on the table. Let us know which part of it you want,
Mm-hmm.
how you want us to carve it up, and letting them know that we understand the dynamics of power, privilege, and influence. And whilst we're here on the motherland,
Mm-hmm.
how do you want us to present? And if they say, we want you to present at 2 o'clock alone and stop talking at 2:05, then that's exactly what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Because our work should be led by those who are living the experiences of what's happening in country. We can advise, we can give guidance, we can talk about commonalities or experiences that we've learned across the way in our work, but we should never dictate or dominate or occupy the space where we keep control of the mic and it's not passed. But
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubt whatsoever that this is going to be such rich and fruitful conversations and dialogue, because I know you both and you've never taken that approach to parachuting in, saying, look at us, we are the big I am, we're from the States or we're from the UK and this is how we do things.
Yeah.
Your approach has always been to collaborate. Your approach has always been to be open. And your approach has also been to be silent when you know you need to be. You know, something that you and Rocky do so powerfully together is that Rocky understands that Josie is a Black queer woman. And when the voice of Josie needs to be heard, Rocky doesn't need to say anything. Josie also understands that Rocky has been in the industry of film and entertainment for how long, and never speaks over you and allows your voice to be heard through that. And that's exactly what you take into going into the continent of Africa, because it's not a country, by the way, people.
Yeah.
Africa is the continent. and you do it with meaning and intention, and you will find that people want your advice because you're giving them that open space to
Mm,
talk about their experiences. And I'd also say, understand that there is trauma, there's generational trauma that some people don't even get a chance to speak about. So whilst there may be some frustrations on timing and so forth, and be mindful that actually elders may want to do things in a different way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Phyll, for your wisdom there. And, you know, me mentioning this, obviously being a native South African myself, it's kind of, this journey is a journey of healing. It's a journey of hopefully giving something back to the next generation of, you know, African queer people who have been subjected to so much hurt and so on with whether it be within the continent or beyond. And so for me, like from the very beginning on embarking on this journey with Rocky, that was always like my guiding light, was that one day I hope we can take this to the motherland to hopefully, you know, I know we're not going to change everybody's minds, but at least it's planting a seed, and we know that seeds grow.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what is in my mind, and I hope that we will be able to at least plant that seed and then allow the rest to grow. So
Yeah.
for your wisdom and advice there, we're just really excited about this opportunity.
I'm excited for you.
I had a question going in that maybe you could help me with
Mm,
before heading to Africa. I'm wondering if you and for the audience as well, if you can help maybe shape some of the biggest challenges facing the LGBTQ community across Africa. We
mhm.
know we're talking about just even some of the different countries and how there's different levels within this, but maybe you can sum it up, especially for the American audience, to put it into perspective of what's really going on.
Yeah. Look, I think that Africa as a continent, there, you know, being queer is not un-African. But what we have been taught or we've learned because the Bible or because religion, I should say, has been used against us is that we are the undesirables. We are not worthy of legislation that protects us. And this is not entirely across the board, but we have seen such a regression in this bill in Ghana, which kind of is like the blueprint of what happened in Kenya and what happened in Uganda. And they've somewhat taken it, turned it around, and the framework of this bill absolutely needs to change a constitution. And when constitutions have to be changed, there's money involved. And I don't think that Ghana has recognized that there's an economic impact here. But I think the laws that we're seeing, and I digress slightly, the laws and legislation that we're seeing is extremely harmful because we're now not even just talking about, you know, imprisonment of 5 years or 10 years. Some are starting to talk about what death penalty looks like. Some are starting to talk about how occupying some of our straight friends that might help us occupy spaces, they will be criminalized for harboring or holding spaces for queer people. So what that tells you is that the attack is coming on many different fronts. But
Mm,
I would say the politicization of queer people, a lot of this has stemmed from religious fundamentals that have come in. You know, it's very much like the old missionaries come in and talk about abstinence and so forth, but they've come in because they've got money. And you have got such an emboldened right wing that's happening right across the board, whether it is in the States, whether it is in the UK, whether it is in parts of Africa or the Caribbean. And they're the ones who are organizing and they're the ones who have money. And they are scapegoating our communities rather than dealing with some of the real issues of, you know, modern day slavery,
mm,
rather than child trafficking, rather than the fact that the lights are not on and harm is coming to particular communities because of the safety issues, rather than the issues around rape and violence towards women. So to scapegoat queer people means that they don't have to address those issues that are fundamentally destroying groups of people that need safety. So We've got good news stories though, and I think that there is hope. You
Yeah.
know, we've seen Botswana repeat, is it 154, 164? We've seen, South Africa, of course, has the strongest constitution, right?
Mm,
It
mm,
is the pinpoints, the landmark that we all want to get to. However, there are some fundamental wrongs
yeah.
in South Africa about where we see hate crime towards lesbian, gay, bisexual,
Hmm.
transgender women and men and non-binary people. But then we look to the Caribbean and we've seen Antigua and Barbuda, we've seen St. Kitts and Nevis, we've seen, oh my gosh, not Jamaica, but we've seen so much happening around the world where they have looked at decriminalization and it looks great. St. Lucia, all
Mm,
of this is absolutely positive.
yeah.
So I'm hoping that again we can start turning the tide. But we need funding, we need resources, we need organizations like Human Dignity Trust, Kaleidoscope Trust, others to do this work that helps fund those who are in the continent of Africa, like Access Chapter 2, to take forward this work. But there is hope, because if we lose hope, we lose everything.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Phyll, and for your advice and your wisdom and just everything. This conversation today has been so, I love your company, and just you radiate everything that we need in this world, and that's hope and positivity. And like you said on Wednesday, finding moments of joy even in this world that is just on fire right now, because without that, how can we survive through this turbulent time? So I appreciate your input, your wisdom, and this conversation today. You mentioned a little bit about hope, but I just want to ask you this question specifically.
Wow.
What makes you get up in the morning?
Wow. Apart from that, I've got to feed the dog and let her go and do her business. What gets me up? A number of different things. So I am guided by my ancestors. Yeah. I know my purpose. I know my worth. I know what I need to do. I do not take my role whilst I'm here in the flesh on this earth for a joke. I take it very, very seriously. But I'm also propelled to do this work because of our next generation.
Mm-hmm.
I have a daughter, and that's my legacy, right? When I pass and leave this world in the flesh, I want to know that young people like her do not have to have it harder than where we left it. When she went to university, she joined all the societies and she joined the LGBT society. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a daughter that's queer. And I spoke to her, and her words were, I don't speak like this. No, 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 I'm strictly dickly and it's not hereditary. I love my queer community, but no, she's straight. But for me, knowing that she joined those societies gave me such hope and inspiration that that's my legacy. And she's gonna
Yeah.
I've done one thing right on this earth, that I've taught her about dignity, respect, and justice and what's important. So it's the community that gives me hope. It's definitely my daughter, but it's also my partner, because I've learned to love.
Mm,
My grand age of plus 50. I've learned to understand that I'm allowed to have a softer life,
mm,
and I'm allowed to see those moments of joy, even though, as we did say, the world's on fire, and just enjoy being loved, giving love, loving, and supporting and talking and having companionship whilst doing all the rest of the things that I do. And yeah, I'm a bit of a diva as well, so she leans into that and just allows me to be right 99.9% of the time. So that gives me hope.
Good woman. Happy wife,
Yeah.
happy life.
Yeah, you got to keep on saying that so I can play it all the time to her on repeat, on loop. Yeah.
Put it on the 1946 channel. Happy wife, happy life, happy wife, happy life.
Happy life. Yeah, look, I'm even dancing with you.
We'll make it a trending sound.
Oh, yeah. So actually, before we go, because I know
mm,
we're going to
mhm.
come to time, you two don't often get asked the question. So I want to know, to the both of you, oh my gosh, Josie looks shocked. What Tell me one thing. I want to know from both you and Rocky, one thing that is keeping you hopeful and bringing you joy. I love this.
Wow. Lady Phil's just done an Uno reverse on us. Thank you, Phil. Those are some really interesting questions you asked us. So, what makes me hopeful? What makes me hopeful is seeing people around the world coming together and advocating for change, continuing to remain hopeful even during these really turbulent times. It brings me hope and joy to know that people are still striving and still continuing to do the fight. And I hope that my hope for the future is that we continue to remember the only way that we can overcome any of this is connecting the dots and continuing to strive for things intersectionally. So yeah, I remain hopeful because I know that people like us and others similar to us out there will continue to amplify the voices of those who may not necessarily have access or the privilege to continue pushing that dial. And that brings me hope that we will continue doing that in whichever way that we can. You also asked what brings me joy. What brings me joy is our community, our queer community, seeing the next generation that are coming up the ladder and just continuing to be their authentic selves and not trying to be pushed into little pigeonholes. They're just blossoming. What brings me joy is my chosen family and also, the people in my life that I keep in my inner circle and the amazing friendships that I've been able to develop over the years. What brings me joy is being able to live authentically myself. And as I get older and more mature, I feel like just being my amazing, queer, beautiful person of color self, that brings me joy without feeling that I need to apologize for being who I am. So thank you. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. I love the turn it around on the host thing. This is not fair. We're not prepared. But I love it. I would say what brings me joy is all the comments that we get on 1946. Like we get a lot of hate, of course, and we get a lot of nonsense and just the same old recycled crap that's just, but we get a lot of really good and people who are like just finding the page or, wow, I didn't even think that being gay wasn't a sin. That release of shame and that transformative kind of mindset is really powerful. And so that really keeps me going. Another thing that is really meaningful is when we get the support that we need. People often ask, why is your movie still up for rent? It's like, it's $3.99. And if you can't afford it, send me an email. We'll give you a free watch link. But we can't sustain the work without the support. So
Mm-hmm.
seeing that people are still renting the film, they're sharing the film, they're still doing watch parties. We just sold an educational link to University of Massachusetts. What? In Amherst
Wow.
this week, which is great. And so now it'll be available in their library for students. And so churches are still sharing it, universities are still sharing it. We've been all over the world this year. Taiwan, Korea, France. We were about to go to the Netherlands, back to Paris Pride. We're going to South Africa. We're going to Berlin later this year. We just got the Berlin subtitles, and so seeing the
Mhm.
response of the community is really powerful, but also seeing the response of our donors that still happens. How do you think we got the language accessibility? Somebody sent us the money, and so without that, we can't keep going. So that really is inspiring and encouraging that I've learned the art of asking and then people respond. And so not only again, like you said, there's different levels from the donors to the volunteers to the people that we
Yeah.
impact. It all makes a difference and a ripple effect. So that is what gives me hope and keeps me going. What brings me joy is very simple. My lovely wife, Diane, and of course, Ruben. But yes, to answer your question, there you go.
Oh, I love this. I'm glad I threw it back at you, but it's important. So now, as the host of the 1946 podcast,
Exactly, exactly. Listen, I'm retired. I'm done. This is the closing episode. Yeah.
oh, but look, thank you so much for having me. Josie, Rocky, this has been a pleasure.
And for everyone listening to the Culture Shift Tour, we're actually, Josie and I are going to start doing around the world. So we're going to start introducing all the people that we've met from around the world and people that we're going to continue to meet in the future. stay tuned for the next Culture Shift tour coming after the summer because we have a busy summer. But yes, Lady Phyll, thank you so much for your time, and we will see you in real life hopefully real soon.
Lady Phyll Opoku-Gyimah, thank you so much, so much for your time and for joining us on the 1946 Culture Shift Tour. As always, we love and respect you and love the work that you're doing. Continue being your amazing self, and thank you again so much for joining us today.
Definitely. Okay, take care, and love to all your listeners as well. Happy Pride!
Happy Pride!
Happy Pride!
There's a way to escape from this pain. You don't have to fall away. You don't have to learn to stay as you bow your tears to pray.